Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Fitness Fridays. Hey, everybody. On this Fitness Friday, we're going to have a quasi-structured discussion about staying fit while you travel. This partly started with something that I saw on, believe it or not, the rvlife.com blog from Peggy Dent, How to Stay Fit While Traveling Full-Time. Now, this is for full-time RVers, which is something I'm interested in as I try to retire early here. But what about just travel in general? I think there's a couple of things that we need to consider if you want to stay fit when you're running around, even if it's travel for work. One is, let's say 1A, screen. Use a PAR-Q or something along those lines. Work with a knowledgeable physician to actually get cleared. What are you capable of doing? I see a lot of templates online. One size does not fit all. When you go to the doctor for other things, she doesn't tell you, oh, here's a template, just go follow this, you need this much, whatever. She does an individual assessment. They take your blood pressure, maybe some blood work. They individualize it, and that's what those screens are for. If you can't do it healthfully, don't do it. Nobody wants to get hurt. That'll set you back like crazy, especially if you're older, but really for anybody. 1B here is get some baseline testing done. Again, this is to individualize it to yourself, not for health now, but for performance. How will you know you're progressing unless you get baseline information? Very, very important. So I would recommend once you determine what type of program you're going to do, what movements, for example, how will you know your baseline? That's very important to get this sort of data. These data can take the form of number of repetitions in a minute. It could be strength norms that you find on the internet. I would look for legitimate ones through perhaps a legitimate source, .edu, university departments, for example, or the American College of Sports Medicine, ACSM, the National Strength Conditioning Association, the NSCA. They're going to have norms so you can compare yourself to similarly aged and fit people. I wouldn't worry too much about norms, though. You want to compare yourself, to your baseline. What kind of progress are you making in your exercise program? So what do I mean by exercise program? The general exercise programming template is FITT. This has been adopted by all kinds of professional groups that try to own it and claim it as their own, but this is sort of universal. FITT, frequency, intensity, time, and type of the workout. Let me give you some just personal opinions here from experience over the years. And if you want something more than just my opinion, I would suggest you go check out health.gov, the physical activity guidelines for Americans. Some people don't even know we have these, just like we have the dietary guidelines. We have the physical activity guidelines for Americans. They suggest 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week. And that could be brisk walking. They suggest fast dancing. They also say adults need 2 days a week of muscle strengthening activity. And that's really the harder part for me. Not harder because I don't like it. I actually much prefer it. I mean, the cardio aspects, the endurance can take care of itself with hikes or find some stairs if you're capable in a hotel, brisk walks outside. Anything is better than nothing on the endurance side. The strength part, though, it requires resistance, and that becomes the challenge. How do you get that sort of resistance in this final T in the FIT concept, right? Frequency, intensity, time, and type. That type becomes a challenge with the strength aspects. Because I have a pickup truck and an RV, I've decided to have one lightweight dumbbell that I can just use for small things. Just a 30 or 40 pound dumbbell. That's right for me. Another one may be right for you, another size. But strength bands, Dyna bands, also a big deal. You could throw them in your backpack. There's no weight, right? It's resistance without weight. Freaking brilliant. Find the right tension of Dyna band. There's whole posters of guides on how to use Dyna bands online. And then, of course, there are body weight exercises. I'm still a fan of push-ups. They grind my beat-up shoulders from all those years of bodybuilding training, heavy benching and whatnot. Well, heavy for me. But push-ups, crunches. I still like V-sits. Go look up V-sits as far as the coordination and the whole core involvement, if you're capable of something like that. Planks, right? If you don't like the V-sits, isometric type things like planks, even for legs, wall sits. Go look up wall sits, if you will. Very interesting stuff. Isometric muscle contractions can be quite valuable there. In fact, while we're talking about alternate forms of contractions like isometric, which is just tensing muscle when it's in place, there's no joint movement per se. There's also eccentric, right? Negatives, slow lowering movements. You could take that dumbbell or that Dynaband and lower it very slowly, less metabolically taxing in the moment, but great for muscle mass. Eccentric work causes more soreness. You're probably not going to do this every single day, but if you could take a movement and on the downward gravity-drawn portion of it, slow it down for a 4 count, that can be very helpful for some people just to get that muscle development. And I know we jumped forward to the type here, but for the dynamic types of shortening contractions, plyometrics can be great if you're able to do those, like box jumps of the height really is going to depend on your fitness level. I spent the other day jumping off the tailgate of my truck many times, just in and out just to get stuff done, and I was amazed my quads were sore the next day just from that braking, if you will, slowing contraction as you hit the ground sort of thing. So plyometric stuff can be pretty interesting as well. Upper body, again, you're really going to use the Dynabands. Chins, if you could find something. If you can't do a full chin up, you can even just hold it, again, with the isometric, or do the eccentric, right, the negatives, and just jump up into position and lower yourself slowly. I've used one of those bars that go across the top of doorways. You're going to have to get creative with the chins kind of thing, but that's a great exercise. Cross bench dips, so you can put your hands behind your butt on one solid surface, put your heels on another solid surface, and just sort of do dips that way. There's lots of ideas. You have to find things that fit your body the best. Once you know it's safe, you can get these baseline measurements, and then you can, number 3 on our list is monitor. And I don't want to get to that just yet. So we do 1A is screen, 1B, get baseline, 2 is program with this fit principle, and 3 is monitor. But let me just revisit all the FITT here quickly. From a frequency perspective, experience tells me 1 to 2 times a week to maintain, probably 2 if you're older, sadly, because you just regress more quickly, 3 to 5 times to really progress. However, that's going to be woven into the time component of this fit principle. But I would suggest 1 to 2 to maintain, 3 to 5 to progress. Just real spitballing there. For intensity, we're thinking about percent of maximal ability. So it could be percent of your 1 repetition maximum, percent of your maximum heart rate. Even where you are on a 20 scale of just subjective perceived exertion. But once you know what that baseline is and you're okayed from your physician, it's important to understand that intensity has really been a trend over the last 10 years, getting a little bit more intense. For example, if you walk very intensely, that's better than a slow stroll. And now you could see why the I in FITT is woven into the first T, time, because there's an intensity-time inverse relationship. If it's more intense, the required time goes down, right? You're burning more calories in a given amount of time. And although I do suggest working with a legitimate exercise physiologist, someone that went to school for this to help you navigate all of it, you will get used to the idea of how many beats per minute is a moderate intensity. Like, is it 120 beats per minute for you? You could just take your pulse for 10 seconds, multiply by 6. There's lots of ways to do this sort of thing to monitor the intensity. And then finally, because we're just about out of time here, this is really just an awareness kind of introduction, but that is monitor. I just mentioned monitoring 2 fingers on your carotid artery in your neck. It could be an Apple Watch that'll give you both heart rate and even heart rate variability, which is a topic for another day. You can look at a whole lot of different things, monitor a whole lot of different things. Respiratory rate, do you find yourself really panting at a low pace? Honestly, respiratory rate, breathing rate is not that big of a problem as far as it's a fairly easy way to look at your intensity. If you start to pant, you're probably shifting into a little bit more carbohydrate burning. There's other things at work here, but the idea here is that's getting a little bit more intense just about when you're about to pant. that's where you're in that moderate intensity range as a rule of thumb. And obviously there are accelerometers or pedometers to see how many steps per day that you're getting in. When people diet really aggressively, I like them to wear either a hip or a wrist type of pedometer to get how much movement throughout the day. Even at sleep, during sleep, you could see how much movement you have. You don't want a ton of wakefulness and movement at night. You can monitor your sleep quality, but monitoring is a big deal. How else do you know you're steering the ship in the right direction? You should be able to become more fit as the weeks progress, getting in more reps per minute, a lower resting heart rate, better sleep, body fatness. That I would really wait about 2 months before I started looking at that, but you get the idea of monitoring over time. But that's going to be it for this brief introduction that all started with an RV article about staying fit on the road. But you really have to kind of do your homework, prepare, just like with dieting. It's amazing to me how many times the principles between exercise and dieting overlap. I know I've studied them both. But that's going to be it for this time, and we'll see you later. The nutritionradio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.